Most people think the Frick Mansion exists because America loved art and protected it. Marble halls, Vermeer light, silence preserved by money. But in 1914, crowds outside its gates cheered destruction. Unions burned symbols of wealth, and this house was designed to outlast fury, not please it. Inside were canvases bought during strikes, staircases paid for by 12-hour shifts, and a private gallery built while bodies were carried from steel mills. The question is not how the art survived, only why a nation nearly let it vanish at all. Henry Clay Frick learned early that survival demanded control. He was born in 1849 in a log farmhouse outside Scottdale, Pennsylvania. The walls were thin. Winter came through the cracks. His grandfather, a whiskey distiller, died when tax collectors seized the stills. His father worked farms owned by other men. Frick watched this. He understood that ownership, not labor, determined who ate and who froze. At 14, he left school for a country store. Ledgers taught him more than books. Numbers revealed patterns. Debts destroyed families. Credit built empires. By 21, he had saved enough to purchase coke ovens. Not steel, not rails, coke. The black fuel that fed every furnace in Pittsburgh. He controlled what others required. The coke fields outside Connellsville stretched for miles. Beehive ovens glowed orange through the night. Men shoveled coal into chambers where heat transformed carbon into fuel. The air smelled like sulfur and ash. Frick walked those fields at dawn, calculating yields, negotiating rail contracts, buying land while competitors borrowed and failed. By 1880, he owned over 1,000 ovens. He was 31 years old. Andrew Carnegie noticed. Carnegie needed coke the way cities needed water. His steel mills consumed thousands of tons each month. Frick controlled supply. Carnegie controlled demand. They formed a partnership that reshaped American industry. Frick became chairman of Carnegie Steel Company in 1889. He did not celebrate. He implemented. Efficiency replaced sentiment. Costs dropped. Output rose. Profits compounded. Pittsburgh made him wealthy. New York made him permanent. Fifth Avenue at the turn of the century was not a street. It was a declaration. Vanderbilts built palaces. Astors erected fortresses. Each mansion announced dominance in limestone and bronze. Frick arrived in 1895 and lived first in a rented home. He studied the avenue. He observed what worked, what endured, what commanded respect without begging for it. He purchased a full block between 70th and 71st Streets in 1906. The land cost $2.4 million. The location was deliberate, far enough from the commercial chaos of Midtown, close enough to Central Park for air and light, surrounded by families who understood that privacy was the final luxury wealth could buy. Construction began in 1913. Architect Thomas Hastings designed a building that rejected fashion. No turrets, no excess. The exterior was Indiana limestone, pale and smooth, arranged in classical proportions that referenced 18th century European restraint. The facade stretched 140 feet along Fifth Avenue, 70 feet deep, 3 stories high, but feeling taller because the first floor sat elevated above street level. Pedestrians looked up. That was the point. The walls were built thick, not for insulation, for separation. 18 inches of limestone, brick, and steel framing. Sound from Fifth Avenue traffic died before reaching interior rooms. Crowds gathered outside during labor protests in 1914. Inside, silence. The mansion absorbed noise the way fortresses absorbed cannon fire. Thick walls were not architecture. They were strategy. Every detail reinforced control. The entrance faced East 70th Street, not Fifth Avenue. Visitors approached from the side, passing through a gated courtyard before reaching the front door. This detour was intentional. It forced guests to transition from public space to private domain. No one arrived casually. Entry required permission. Inside, the rooms flowed with calculated purpose. The entrance hall opened into a gallery corridor that stretched the length of the building. Light entered through a central courtyard, washing white walls in diffused brightness. Frick placed paintings here: Vermeer, Rembrandt, Titian, canvases worth fortunes arranged as though permanence were guaranteed. The living hall sat at the heart of the mansion, 26 feet wide, 50 feet long, 16 feet high. Walls covered in English oak paneling, ceilings adorned with painted Italian scenes. Furniture arranged not for conversation, but for viewing. Everything faced the art. Guests sat, looked, absorbed. They did not touch. The library occupied the southeast corner. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held volumes Frick collected, but rarely read. Leather spines, gilt titles. First editions purchased because they completed the vision of a man who controlled information as he once controlled Coke. A fireplace dominated one wall. Above it, a portrait, not of Frick, of someone whose legacy was already secure. Upstairs were private chambers, bedrooms, dressing rooms, spaces the public never entered. Frick did not confuse hospitality with access. The mansion had servants' quarters on the third floor and in the basement. Staff moved through hidden staircases. They appeared when summoned and vanished when dismissed. Visibility was a privilege reserved for owners and art. The construction took 2 years, $16 million. That sum included the land, the building, the fixtures, and the systems required to sustain a private world. Climate control for paintings, security measures for valuables, plumbing and electrical systems that functioned invisibly. The mansion was not a home in the traditional sense. It was infrastructure for legacy. Frick moved in during 1914. He was 65. His wife, Adelaide, arranged flowers in the entrance hall. His daughter, Helen, walked the gallery corridor at dusk, studying paintings her father acquired during decades of accumulation. The family inhabited 6 rooms. The rest belonged to art. At night, with lights extinguished and staff retired, the mansion became what it was always meant to be: a fortress. Silent, sealed, certain of its permanence. But certainty requires ignorance. And the past Frick tried to wall away was already scratching at the limestone, demanding entry. The mansion's foundation was not limestone. It was blood. Homestead, Pennsylvania, July 1892, 22 years before the mansion opened its doors. Carnegie Steel operated a massive mill along the Monongahela River. 3,000 workers, 12-hour shifts. Wages negotiated every 3 years by the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, one of the strongest unions in America. The contract expired June 30th. Workers asked for stability. Frick, managing the mill as Carnegie vacationed in Scotland, saw an opportunity. He proposed wage cuts. The union refused. Frick locked them out. He erected a fence around the mill, 15 feet high, topped with barbed wire, searchlights installed on towers. Workers called it Fort Frick. They were not joking. Frick hired 300 Pinkerton agents, private security, armed. Their orders were to secure the mill and allow replacement workers inside. The Pinkertons arrived by barge at dawn on July 6th. Workers lined the riverbank. They had been waiting. Gunfire erupted before the Pinkertons reached shore. Both sides fired. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, 7 workers were dead. 3 Pinkertons were dead. Dozens more wounded. The Pinkertons surrendered. Workers beat them as they marched through town. Pennsylvania's governor sent 8,000 state militia troops to restore order. The mill reopened with non-union labor. The strike collapsed by November. Frick won. But winning has a cost that compounds over time. Newspapers across the country published illustrations of the battle. Editorials condemned him. Political cartoons depicted him as a tyrant. Union leaders called him a murderer. On July 23rd, 3 weeks after Homestead, an anarchist named Alexander Berkman entered Frick's Pittsburgh office and shot him twice. Berkman also stabbed him multiple times. Frick survived. He returned to work that afternoon. The assassination attempt made him a symbol. To industrialists, he represented order. To workers, he represented everything wrong with American power. Homestead followed him to New York. When construction began on the Fifth Avenue mansion in 1913, labor organizers published pamphlets reminding the public that every brick was paid for by homestead wages. Every painting was purchased with profits extracted from 12-hour shifts in 100-degree heat. The mansion was not neutral. It was evidence. Frick knew this. Security at the mansion was not decorative. Guards were hired from agencies specializing in industrial protection. Entrances were monitored. Deliveries were scheduled before dawn to avoid crowds. When Frick left the building, routes were varied. Drivers were trained in evasive procedures. Threats arrived by mail regularly. Most were ignored. Some were investigated. All were filed. Inside the mansion, art continued to arrive. 1899. Frick purchased a portrait by Velázquez, $600,000. 1905. He acquired Rembrandt's Polish Rider, $300,000. 1910. Vermeer's Mistress and Maid joined the collection, $1 million. 1914. The mansion opened. That same year, Turner's The Harbor of Dieppe arrived, $450,000. The acquisition timeline never paused for labor unrest, public outrage, or political pressure. Art became insulation. Each painting added another layer between Frick and the world that wanted to hold him accountable. Galleries filled while homestead widows raised children on factory compensation that ended after 2 years. The mansion's daily operations revealed the machinery required to maintain beauty. 30 servants worked full-time. Maids cleaned galleries each morning before the family woke. Footmen polished silver and brass. Cooks prepared meals in basement kitchens that rivaled restaurant operations. Laundresses worked in dedicated rooms with industrial equipment. Engineers maintained climate systems that kept humidity and temperature stable for paintings worth more than the homes of everyone who served them. Servants entered through a ground-level door on 70th Street. They used back staircases. Their quarters on the 3rd floor had low ceilings and small windows. Meals were eaten in the basement. Time off was granted twice monthly. Wages were competitive by standards of 1914, but proportional thinking is deceptive. A maid earned $400 annually. The Vermeer she dusted each week cost 2,500 times her yearly salary. The contrast was not accidental, it was structural. Adelaide Frick managed household operations with the same efficiency her husband applied to steel. She reviewed menus daily, approved purchases, inspected linens. She was not cruel. She was exacting. Standards mattered because the mansion existed to prove that wealth could produce order, beauty, and permanence. Disorder was failure. Servants who failed were replaced. Outside, the city was changing. Progressive reformers questioned private accumulation. Journalists like Ida Tarbell exposed corporate abuses. Labor activists demanded regulation. Theodore Roosevelt called for a square deal. Woodrow Wilson campaigned on new freedom. The political center was shifting away from unchecked industrial power. Estates like Frick's were no longer admired by default. They required justification. Frick offered none. He did not write memoirs. He did not grant interviews defending his record. He collected art and attended board meetings. When critics called him heartless, he bought another Rembrandt. When unions protested outside his gates, he added another Van Dyck. Art was his answer, not because he believed it absolved him, but because he believed it outlasted criticism. And for a while, he was right. The mansion became a private kingdom where the 20th century's chaos could not penetrate. Wars were distant. Strikes were abstract. Inside, only beauty mattered. Frick walked his galleries each evening before dinner, hands behind his back, studying paintings he had pursued for decades. He believed he had built something immune to time and rage. But immunity is a fantasy that history tests ruthlessly. By 1919, the world outside the mansion was no longer willing to tolerate monuments to extraction. The war had ended. Soldiers returned. Workers demanded dignity. Socialists gained municipal power. The public began asking a question that terrified men like Frick. Should private individuals control cultural inheritance, or does great art belong to everyone? That question would outlive him, and his answer, locked inside the mansion, would determine whether his collection survived at all. Henry Clay Frick died on December 2, 1919. He was 70 years old. His body was placed in the living hall, surrounded by paintings he had spent 40 years acquiring. Mourners arrived in black. Servants draped mirrors. The mansion fell silent. Outside, newspapers printed obituaries that balanced accomplishment with condemnation. He had built an empire. He had crushed unions. He had collected masterpieces. He had ordered violence. Both truths coexisted, unreconciled. His will was read within days. It contained instructions that shocked even his family. The mansion and its entire collection would become a public museum after Adelaide's death. Not immediately, not during her lifetime, but eventually. The art would remain intact. The building would stay as he designed it. Admission would be free or nominal. The collection could not be sold, loaned, or divided. Frick had spent his life resisting public access. In death, he mandated it. The reasoning was pragmatic, not generous. Frick understood that private fortunes attracted taxes and political hostility. Public institutions received protection. By transforming his mansion into a museum, he weaponized the very forces that threatened him. Progressives who wanted to seize his wealth could not dismantle a public trust. Labor activists who condemned his fortune could not destroy art designated for communal inheritance. The mansion would survive because it no longer belonged to him. But survival required Adelaide's cooperation. And Adelaide was not ready to surrender her home. She lived in the mansion for 12 more years. She maintained the household exactly as her husband had designed it. Servants remained employed. Paintings stayed on their walls. The galleries were cleaned and monitored. But the doors stayed locked. The public was denied. Adelaide honored the spirit of her husband's will by preparing the mansion for its future. She refused to accelerate it. Outside, impatience grew. Progressives demanded immediate access. Why should one woman occupy a palace intended for public use? Editorial writers questioned the fairness of Adelaide enjoying art that legally belonged to future generations. Union organizers protested outside the gates, arguing that workers who built the fortune deserved to see what it purchased. The mansion became a symbol again, not of power this time, of delay. Pressure intensified as the 20s roared forward. The stock market soared, wealth inequality widened. Cultural critics began arguing that private art collections were fundamentally illegitimate. Great works belonged in museums, not drawing rooms. John D. Rockefeller Jr. opened the cloisters. J.P. Morgan's collections were divided among institutions. Andrew Mellon began planning the National Gallery. The era of private palaces was ending. Estates were transforming or dissolving. Adelaide ignored the noise. The mansion was hers until death. The will said so. She had no obligation to justify her presence. She had lost a daughter to illness and a husband to old age. The mansion contained her memories. She would leave when she chose. But memory is not protection. And the political climate was shifting toward redistribution. Franklin Roosevelt was elected president in 1932. The New Deal brought federal intervention into private wealth. Estate taxes increased. Regulations multiplied. The government began treating concentrated fortunes as public concerns requiring oversight. The wealthy adapted or fought. Those who adapted donated. Those who fought lost. The Frick Mansion existed in legal limbo. The will designated it as a future museum, but the present was uncertain. Could the city claim it through eminent domain? Could creditors seize it if the estate faced financial challenges? Could the collection be taxed as private property or protected as a cultural trust? Lawyers debated. Courts had no clear precedent. The mansion's fate depended on interpretations that had not yet been tested. Adelaide died on October 4, 1931. She was 71. The legal machinery her husband designed activated immediately. The Frick collection opened to the public on December 16, 1935. 4 years of preparation, legal reviews, structural assessments, cataloging. The mansion was modified minimally. A reception area was added. Security was upgraded. But the galleries remained unchanged. The living hall where Adelaide entertained guests became a public space. The library where Frick read reports became a viewing room. The intimacy of private life was preserved even as its purpose transformed. The opening was controversial. Critics argued that allowing the mansion to function as a museum legitimized the wealth that built it. By celebrating the collection, society was forgiving Homestead. By preserving Frick's vision, America was endorsing the extraction that funded it. The museum became a moral test. Could art exist separately from its origin? Could beauty transcend the violence that paid for it? Others saw it differently. The collection was already assembled. The paintings existed. Destroying the mansion would not resurrect Homestead workers. Opening the doors allowed the public to reclaim what had been taken from them. Not the money, not the years, but access to culture that industrial profits purchased and industrial ethics denied. The debate never resolved. It compounded. During the Depression, visitors lined up outside the mansion. Admission was free on weekdays. People came to see what wealth looked like. They studied Vermeers and Rembrandts. They walked halls built by labor they understood intimately. Some felt inspired, others felt rage. The mansion did not adjudicate those reactions. It simply existed, offering beauty without apology and legacy without redemption. World War II complicated everything further. Cultural preservation became a patriotic duty. European masterpieces were endangered by Nazi looting. American institutions represented safe harbor. The Frick collection was framed as part of the nation's moral responsibility to protect civilization. The narrative shifted. What had been a monument to greed became a guardian of heritage. But narratives are not truth. They are strategies for managing truth. The mansion survived because survival served multiple agendas. Progressives could point to it as proof that private wealth could be redistributed. Conservatives could cite it as evidence that great men built lasting institutions. Educators could use it to teach art history. Tourists could visit it to feel cultured. Everyone found utility. No one had to reconcile the contradictions. And the contradictions were profound. A house built to exclude now welcomed thousands. A collection purchased during labor suppression now educated students. A fortress designed to resist fury now depended on public goodwill for funding and protection. The transformation was complete. But transformation is not absolution. The crisis the mansion faced was not whether it would survive. It was whether survival without accountability meant anything at all. The Frick collection opened its doors and never closed them again. Decades passed, millions visited. Students studied Bellini and Holbein. Scholars researched provenance and technique. Tourists photographed facades and interiors. The mansion became what Frick envisioned in his will. A public institution preserving private taste. A museum operating under restrictions that honored the dead while serving the living. But calling it a resolution suggests that something was solved. Nothing was solved. The mansion endured by transforming its purpose without addressing its past. The contradictions remained visible to anyone willing to see them. Walk through the entrance on East 70th Street. Pass through the courtyard where servants once unloaded deliveries before dawn. Enter the gallery corridor where Frick studied paintings purchased during the same years he fought unions and survived assassination. Stand in the living hall where Adelaide mourned in silence while outside, the city debated whether her home should be taken from her. Every room tells two stories. One is about art, the other is about power. The official narrative focuses on beauty. The collection includes works by Vermeer, Rembrandt, Goya, El Greco, and Turner. 3 paintings by Vermeer, more than 40 works by major European masters, furniture by Boulle, porcelain from Sèvres, sculpture spanning centuries. The quality is undeniable. The cultural value is immense. The public benefit is real, but benefit does not erase origin. The mansion exists because Henry Clay Frick extracted wealth from laborers and converted it into culture. He did not create the paintings. He purchased them. He did not earn the money through innovation alone. He earned it through control, suppression, and calculated cruelty. Homestead was not an accident. It was strategy. The mansion was not generosity. It was legacy insurance. Acknowledging both truths does not diminish the art. It complicates the inheritance. Visitors who walk through the Frick collection today see Vermeer's mistress and maid and respond to its light, its composition, its quiet intimacy. That response is valid. The painting is astonishing, but the purchase price was $1 million in 1910. That sum represented 2,500 years of labor for a homestead mill worker, earning $400 annually. The painting and the math coexist. Both are true. The mansion's survival required compromises that reshaped American cultural philanthropy. After Frick, industrialists understood that private collections could become public institutions under terms they controlled. Endow a museum. Attach restrictions, preserve the vision, avoid taxes, secure legacy. The model worked. It spread. Nearly every major American art museum has roots in private fortunes that were laundered through public benefit. Laundered is a harsh word, but accurate. The Frick collection is not unique. It is emblematic. It represents a deal American society made with itself during the early 20th century. Wealth could be excused if it produced culture. Exploitation could be overlooked if it funded museums. Violence could be forgiven if it left behind beauty. That deal persists. We teach children about Renaissance masters in galleries built by robber barons. We celebrate cultural institutions without interrogating their foundations. The mansion challenges that comfort. It does not allow easy answers. If we close it, we lose access to irreplaceable art. If we open it without context, we celebrate theft. If we contextualize it too heavily, we reduce masterpieces to footnotes in a labor history textbook. There is no clean path. Only choices about which discomfort we are willing to accept. Helen Clay Frick, Henry's daughter, spent her life managing the transformation. She oversaw the museum's opening. She expanded the collection. She established educational programs. She died in 1984 at 96, having devoted 65 years to preserving her father's vision while making it palatable to a century that judged him harshly. Her work succeeded. The museum thrives. Attendance grows. The endowment is secure. But success measured in visitor numbers is not the same as reconciliation measured in moral terms. Today, the Frick collection includes wall text that mentions Homestead, a single sentence. It acknowledges the strike occurred. It notes Frick's role. It does not elaborate. The choice is deliberate. The museum is not a history lesson. It is an art institution. But that distinction is itself a choice about what we prioritize and what we suppress. The mansion's walls still stand thick. They still mute the noise of Fifth Avenue, but they no longer mute history. Scholars write about Homestead. Journalists investigate Frick's labor practices. Activists use the museum as a teaching tool about wealth inequality. The building's meaning has expanded beyond its architecture. It now represents the question America has never fully answered. Can beauty exist apart from the systems that produce it? Should it? The answer depends on who you ask and what you value. For some, the Frick collection is proof that great wealth can serve great purposes. For others, it is a monument to injustice disguised as culture. Both perspectives have merit. Neither is complete. What remains undeniable is this: the mansion survived because it adapted. It transformed from fortress to museum. It shifted from private kingdom to public trust. It changed its relationship with the world without changing its walls. That transformation required Frick's death, Adelaide's cooperation, legal ingenuity, political pressure, and decades of negotiation. It did not require apology. It did not demand restitution. It simply required opening the doors. And perhaps that is the mansion's final lesson. Survival is not about being right. It is about being flexible enough to serve new purposes when old ones become indefensible. The art did not change. The building did not change. Only the story we tell about them changed. And that story, however incomplete, was enough to ensure that beauty endured even when the hands that gathered it were stained. The mansion stands today on Fifth Avenue, hosting visitors who marvel at Vermeer's light and Rembrandt's shadows. They walk through rooms designed to resist them. They study paintings purchased with wages denied to their grandparents. They leave inspired, troubled, enriched, or angry. All reactions are correct. The mansion does not resolve them. It only holds space for them to coexist. That is its legacy. not beauty, not wealth, but the uncomfortable truth that great art and great injustice are often bound together, and no amount of public access can fully untangle them. We inherit both, we display both, and we decide, every time we walk through those doors, which story we are willing to see. The Frick Mansion forces us to confront what we would rather ignore. That beauty has a cost, that culture has a history, that opening doors is not the same as making amends. It stands as testament to what survives when power chooses preservation over destruction, and as a reminder that survival alone is not virtue. What other estates carry stories we have not yet examined? What other mansions hold beauty and blood in equal measure? Let me know in the comments which American estate you want explored next. If this story made you think differently about art, legacy, or wealth, consider subscribing. There are dozens of gilded palaces across this country, and each one has a reckoning waiting inside its walls.